Hello and welcome to The Ripple Impact, the podcast where we dive into those fascinating, unexpected ripples, those human stories that change everything in business and in life. Today's guest is Dr. Stefanie Teichmann, an executive coach, business advisor, and former C-suite leader who's shaped strategies at global giants like Nike, Coca-Cola, Google, and McKinsey. She's the founder of Teca, a leadership advisory firm supporting founders, executives, and high-growth teams across the world. But what makes Stefanie's story truly remarkable is not just the companies, it's the personal journey beneath the surface. Stefanie's ripple moments have defined how she shows up and how she helps others lead with presence, purpose, and with power. Today, she coaches some of the most ambitious leaders, but her superpower is helping people find their voice and truly own it. Stefanie, welcome to the show. Delighted to have you with us here today.
Hi, Laura. I'm so pleased to be here. Great to see you.
And you. So we work together at the Coca-Cola company, which feels like forever ago and feels like a heartbeat at the same time. And in fact, I think you were my boss's boss, and the way we first interacted, and actually you were a ripple impact moment for me. And I still remember this conference. It was a strategy and insight conference, and we were in Barcelona, and you took to the stage and you just had such presence and charisma and an aura about you. And I remember just thinking, I want a little bit of that. Like, I want to be a little bit more like Stefanie. How do I emulate this confidence and this style and this knowledge? And I just remember coming up to you afterwards and saying, wow, that was an amazing presentation. Would you mind being my mentor? And you very kindly said yes. So yeah, thank you for that, because you've been one of my ripple impact moments in my career and helped me build my confidence just through your presence and your presentation, let alone what you did in the Coca-Cola business. So thank you.
Wow, Laura. Well, thank you very much. You're very kind. It was great to have you on the team. I really have very good memories of our time together at Coke. So yeah, well, thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. No, thank you. Well, we've jumped ahead to Coca-Cola and how we first met. But the reason I mentioned it then is because one of the stories you told me when we had a catch up is such a juxtaposition to how I came about reaching out to you on an individual and a personal basis, and your story of growing up and a moment of hearing yourself on a tape and that raw emotional reaction and the journey that's taken you on today. Would you mind telling our YouTube watchers and our podcast listeners the story and where you've got to today? Because it's a fantastic one.
Yeah, you were taking me back to my childhood here, Laura, actually. When I grew up, I apparently had quite a strong lisp. And I'm not sure you're aware of that, but when you actually do have a speech impediment, many times the people who have it don't actually hear it because they're hearing their inner ear. It all gets used to it. So I had no idea that I had this really strong lisp walking through the world. And I was lucky. I was never like bullied at school or whatever. But when I was an early teen, I had a cassette recorder. Those were the days, right? And for the first time, I think it must have been for a school project, I taped my own voice and I played it back. And I could not believe it. I broke down crying, hearing my own voice for the first time because there was the lisp, which I had never heard before. And it really shook me. It shook me so bad because how you speak and how you come across is part of your identity. And I was like, that's not me. Do I really sound like this? This is awful. This is terrible. And keep in mind, I always wanted to be a journalist, right? That was my childhood dream of what I wanted to be when I grow up. And I'm like, what kind of TV anchor woman has a lisp, right? So with that in mind, a lot of things all of a sudden made sense that my parents had been doing, like when I was between 5 and 10 years old, because they had tried to help me. I just didn't realize what they were trying to do. And in those days, speech therapy wasn't really a thing like it is today. So they had gone to experts of whatever kind, and they had gotten advice like, you need to send her to a special needs school. Me, I was a straight A student. Or one doctor, a medical doctor, recommended to cut off the tip of my tongue to get rid of the lisp. Thankfully, my parents were quite sound and they just walked off and let me just be the way I was. So I then, when I first heard myself on tape and had this ripple impact moment, I started to try all kinds of strategies myself, like crazy things. Like, for instance, I remember my name is Stefanie, starts with an S. So I tried to speak avoiding all words with S, which is pretty impossible.
It's difficult.
Yeah, it certainly is. Didn't work. And so in the end, for a while, I pretty much gave up. However, then I went to university and I studied, my first master's is in literature, English and German and comparative literature. And I still wanted to be a journalist. So I was like, okay, I was 19. I had to do something about this because I cannot be a journalist like this. So I went on my own little journey, did my own research, and I ended up finding a vocal coach, an expert who actually also works a lot with like opera singers and people who have a stammer, etc. And he was able to help me through what was something like a 6 months process where I first of all understood what was actually happening in my mouth, and that what created the lisp was simply the way I held my tongue, and that I had to learn how to do it correctly and purposefully, and then try to get this into the spontaneous speech, etc. So it was quite a process, but it worked, and it worked so well that right now I can't, even if you forced me to, I wouldn't be able to recreate my lisp from that I had for the first pretty much 20 years of my life. Like, I'm going to talk to my career about my career probably later, but I did actually go into journalism, so that helped. But what was most important for me were some insights and some lessons that I drew consciously or unconsciously for myself out of this whole experience. And it sounds like a platitude, but it's so true. It's like, really never give up. We're not talking about extremes here, but for most problems, right? There is a solution out there somewhere. There is a person out there somewhere who can help you. You just have to be patient and persistent and not give up, and go and find that solution and go and find that person. It will happen. And that's what happened to me. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah, incredible story. From the moment of me encountering you and you being stood on that stage in front of hundreds of people and just holding your own with such gravitas and knowledge and strength and power and conviction and confidence, to then hear that story, because I didn't know this when we knew each other at Coke. You told me this story as part of the preparation for this podcast. It blew me away. I had no idea. And for you to go through that as a child, to then come out the other side, to have such tenacity and such confidence, and to have the career that you've had is incredible. And it was such a beautiful story that I was so desperate for people to hear, because it really touched me, and it still does now, hearing it a second time. So thank you for sharing it. You know, you don't often know what's going on in people's lives and what's happened and what they've been through. And it's amazing to hear that I sought you out for your presentation skills and you had a lisp as a child. Like, it's incredible. So thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you for letting me tell the story. To be fair, I don't think I ever shared it publicly before. And it was definitely one of the most defining moments when you think about it in my early formative years. And I was quite a confident child. However, that moment did shake my confidence for years. And so I definitely had to rebuild it after that. Absolutely. But it's possible.
And so did you go straight into journalism? Is that how you started out of university? Tell us your career trajectory.
Yeah, so I always thought I wanted to be a journalist. Had this dream, like many. While I was doing my master's, I already started doing temp jobs, and I was lucky, but also, again, persistent. I just bothered people so much until they couldn't say no anymore. So I got a 6-month internship at ZDF, which is Second German Television, which was at the time in Bonn, which was the capital at the time. So all the major political events were taking place there. So I was right in the middle of it. And I remember one of the interviews, which unfortunately never was aired because something more important had happened, but it really stuck with me, was I was able to interview Raisha Gorbachev, Mikhail Gorbachev's wife, when she was there to publish her book. While her husband was doing the political stuff, she was doing her book, and I interviewed her, which was absolutely amazing. So yeah, I did go into journalism. To be fair, I didn't like the short-livedness of news. So I was like, okay, you know what? Let me get out of television and let me go into magazines where you have a bit more context, a bit more time. So I joined Time magazine in Bonn and had the chance to work with the most amazing chief correspondent, Bruce van Boris, who was like an incredible mentor to me. And he actually, and the work with him and what I worked on, the topics, actually stimulated my interest in business, because I was never really particularly close to business. So based on this experience, I decided decided to do an MBA and go away from journalism, go away from literature. So I did an MBA in international management. And after the MBA, I was hired as a consultant by McKinsey. And that was pretty much the start of my business career as most people know it. But there was a whole chapter here before that, before I moved into business. What I want to say though is that I noticed it during my MBA, and this comes back to the question of confidence, because I was going into this MBA, and it's an MBA. I was the only German student. Most of them were Americans. Most of them were engineers or science or maths majors. Here I was like a liberal arts major, no particular exposure to business or anything they were good at. And I was like, okay, how is this going to go, right? And what I found out was that actually the study of literature had prepared me in a way that I would have never thought for at least the way MBAs are taught when it comes to case studies, etc. Because let me tell you that analyzing Shakespeare or Thomas Mann or you name it is much more complex than any Harvard business case study you can possibly imagine. And you have a much greater ability to look at the world from different perspectives. And just analytically, you have developed such capabilities that you probably weren't aware of before. So once I figured that out, because everything else, let's face it, things like statistics, etc., it's just learning. You just need to study it. It's not rocket science. But understanding the complexities of particular situation and solving them as part of a team, I was actually very well prepared for, which then gave me the confidence to go and apply, for instance, to McKinsey.
Yeah, you talked about the analytical piece, but also from literature to journalism, the art of storytelling and the ability to inspire and galvanize. And that's certainly what I experienced of you in organization. That's the other part of it that you were already doing before you even stepped into business.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right there. And funnily enough, one of the capability building workshops we do is on executive presence. And there's a whole chapter on storytelling and the importance of storytelling, because as you know better than I do, it's very important for telling brand stories, but it's equally important for telling stories and framing things the right way for audiences like your board, like your investors, like your own teams, like your broader organization, whoever it is. In the end, it's all about creating the right narrative.
Yeah, fantastic. And then from McKinsey, where did you go next?
Yeah, so I spent some time at McKinsey. While I was at McKinsey, I also did a PhD in business administration with a focus on change management. And that also inspired this attribute I have, which is this interest in the intersection between business and people, because that's really where throughout my career, I really do believe the magic happens. So from McKinsey, like so many ex-consultants, at some point, you don't want to just be a consultant. You want to do it yourself. You want to succeed and fail yourself. So I joined Nike, spent 6 years at Nike in various roles, starting off in strategy, the strategic planning team for EMEA out of Hilversum in the Netherlands. Then I took over a business unit director role in Germany. And then I was general manager for Austria and Slovenia out of Vienna. And then I decided that Nike is a fantastic company, but I really wasn't sure if simplified, I want to sell running shoes for the rest of my life, which is of course not all of what I was doing, but I was like, no, I really don't want to do that. I need to figure out if there's something else there. And the interesting thing for me in this time, because I left Nike then without having a new job, because I really wanted to find myself, whatever that is. And I figured out that you can't really find yourself when you're like trying to. I went fasting in a monastery. I thought about doing my own startup. I thought about joining a nonprofit. I did a little bit of consultancy. I did a lot of reflection. I took on a career coach, etc., etc. What I did find out, and that I guess was quite an important insight, is that what I thought I didn't really like, which is working for big American metrics organizations, amazing brands, was actually what I was really good at. So what I ended up doing, as you know, is I joined an even bigger American brand, which is the Coca-Cola company. But I went into the Coca-Cola company with a different mindset, with a mindset where I was clear about the trade-off of this is what I like about big corporates, and this is what why I like working with them, and what I'm really good at and what I can bring to the table. And these are the things I don't really like. And some of them are in my control and some of them are out of my control. And the ones that are out of my control, I have to live with because I'm making the conscious choice to go there and do what I want to do. And that's a compromise I'm willing to enter into. And I guess that made the difference when I then stepped into my career at Coca-Cola.
Amazing. So you've talked about Nike and your time there. And actually, I just want to make the comment of when you talked about McKinsey and you're like, oh yeah, and I just did a PhD at the same time. Knowing how notorious McKinsey are for the deadlines and the intensity of that organization. And you just did a PhD over the top. So I didn't want to just brush over that comment. Some of the stories you told me in our warm-up around your moments at Nike, there were two in particular that were about feedback that you were given that really changed your mindset and how you then took that forward into your career. One moment with one of the CEOs and a moment with a very senior female leader. Can you tell our listeners those stories? There's such powerful lessons in there.
Sure. Yeah, they are very similar in nature and in terms of my own learning. So let me talk to you about the CEO of the EMEA business, who was also heading up strategy development at Nike EMEA. So we reported into him, and he was an ex-McKinsey, which sometimes helps in these situations because you have to share language almost. So after, I don't know, maybe 3-4 months into my tenure at Nike, I was working on a project. It was with the Polish business at the time. And he called me into this office, and he was a super nice guy. And he was like, well, I just wanted to see how you're doing. And so we had a little chit chat. And then he was like, yeah, I just wanted to make you aware that working for an organization like Nike it's not like McKinsey. You are not measured here necessarily on how fast you complete a project. Yes, of course, we would like things to be done in deadlines. Yes, of course, we would like to have particular results, but that is not the key thing. And he had a very amazing way of explaining to me that what was much more important was to lead the projects in a way that brings people along to create sustainable change because they are actually part of the solution. And that is the benefit for the organization. The other benefit is when he pointed out, and for your own career, what is really key is that after a project, people say, I enjoyed working with Stefanie. I want to work with her again. That is much more important than having ticked a few boxes on some KPIs. He was so right. And apart from these things that I just mentioned, for me, the deeper learning was something that I only caught on then, which is up to that point, I always thought I can change the world by myself. I don't need anybody else. And even things like the stories of the lisp go back into you can do things if you want to, which is true. But what I learned at Nike and also in the other companies that I worked for later and helped by people like him was really like, you need a network. You need allies to create the change you want, to create the world you want. And nobody by themselves is good enough to be able to do it all by themselves. And I really took that to heart. And that's when I started also thinking about networks more strategically and about the value of relationships and bringing people along on your journey.
Such a fantastic story and such an important one to learn. And the story around the female leader is a similar one in terms of relationships and more in the context of timing and what's needed. Can you share that story? Because
sure.
It's such a lovely one.
Yeah, an amazing, very senior leader at Nike. And she was definitely my mentor. She was the one who'd given me chances to lead businesses when I didn't have a track record of experiences. So I had a lot to be really grateful about. One day we were at this really, really big sales conference that happens once a year where the sales force from all over the world comes to look at the new collections, etc. She and her merchandising team globally had made a huge effort into presenting that season's product in the best possible way that was available to her at the time with the resource constraints that she had. And she was very proud, and she led me around. I think it was in Portland. And she was like, so what do you think? And I did not necessarily acknowledge all the great things that I saw. And I didn't necessarily see all the amazing effort that had been put into this. But I focused on a few things that I think could have been done better. I almost want to say with my former consultant mindset that is so drilled on seeing improvement opportunities. And it was with the best of all intentions. But you mentioned mentioned it. The timing was just shit. Like, why would you say that at a time when this person is clearly super excited, right? And she was very upset with me, which really, it took me a while to understand that, because I was like, no, this is all great. I'm just saying X. Yeah, but just saying X, you really have to, before you open your mouth, it really helps to think about, how do you want the other person to feel? What is the impact that you are having on the people around you through your behavior and through your communication? Did I want to achieve this? Did I want to have this result? Of course not. So I did apologize profusely and she forgave me in the end. But oh my God, I learned my lesson. Now more so than before, I asked myself, is it helpful? Is it necessary? And is it kind?
Yeah, it's so simple, but it's so powerful. Because as you said, you had the best intent. You wanted to help her and arguably improve it for next time. But in that moment, she probably just needed reassurance and affirmation that she'd done a fantastic job. And maybe a week later, I've been having a think, and what about this for next time? And she'd been like, yes, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing, that it's with the best intent. And it's knowing that person as well, though, because some people want that critique, don't they? And some people need the reassurance. So what a powerful lesson.
Yeah, it also taught me something about, don't give feedback unless you're asked. And I'm not talking about formal performance reviews, different setup, but like walking through the world and sharing your feedback with people who didn't ask for it. Yeah. Just make sure that people are actually in the right space for it and actually want it.
Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to remember if it was Coke. They did the training around feedback is a gift. So good intention feedback technique. But often timing isn't really discussed. So what a powerful lesson. Yeah. Wow. And the nature of relationships. And as you said, the network and the relationships and that support and peer network that you build around yourself as you go through your career. So from Nike to Coca-Cola, tell us some of your ripple impact moments from that business, because it was incredible organization we were both part of.
Yeah, the Coca-Cola company is an amazing company. And I was lucky to join them in London as, at the time, their head of strategy and insights for Northwest Europe. Later, then it became Europe. And I joined at a very difficult time, because I joined at a time when the company was going through a reorganization, which was a centralization of various countries, which meant that a lot of jobs were lost. And the way it's handled in many companies is that you pretty much let go everybody, and then people have to re-interview for the new jobs. But there's less, it's like musical chairs. There's less chairs, and you have to apply for these roles. So I was hired at the time when pretty much everybody else was fired. And I was hired as the new head of strategy and insights. And I was given, I remember this, I was given an org chart with empty boxes. So I knew the number of boxes, but I didn't know anything else. The boxes were empty. So it was part of my job to interview for these boxes, to figure out the right structure, interview for these boxes, and make the new organization work. And this was just one of the departments. The other leaders had the same for their functions, right? But the other leaders had already all been around for many, many, many years. They were all like Coke veterans. I was brand new to the company and the industry. So really just a few weeks into this, they were planning a roadshow across all the countries affected to talk to them about the new structure and what it meant. And I was told, like, okay, so this is your new structure, and this is what it's going to look like. And every other department leader will go up on stage and in a convincing way, engagingly and positively talk about this new organization. And I was like, okay, I'll try my best. And yeah, that didn't turn out too well, because I didn't really know enough. I didn't really understand the structure and the business model. The business model, of course I did, but the intricacies of what the strategy and insights function had been doing in all the different countries that I was now centralizing, I didn't really understand what was behind part of the titles that were in these organizational boxes that were empty. There weren't names, there were just titles like job roles in there. I didn't really understand the detail behind it. I didn't understand how this structure really worked with the other structures. And here I was on stage in various countries. And I remember France particularly. The French, I love them to bits, but they are certainly quite critical when it comes to job law. And I'm sure there was like a union representative somewhere in the audience, or a works council or something like that. And here I was on stage trying to explain the structure that I didn't fully understand myself, that I also probably, if I had understood more, would not have created this way. And here I was explaining and defending it. And the guys and girls in the audience, they had some very good questions, which half of them I couldn't answer because I just simply didn't know. So I had to defer to other people on the leadership team, like the CEO or the head of marketing, which ended up making me feel horrible because I felt incompetent. I felt I had lost complete credibility with this crowd. And I was physically nervous when it came to then presenting the same in other countries, because the little bit of confidence that I had at the time, because I used to be a very confident presenter, I had lost in France. It was gone. It was really tough going. And I took a few very important lessons here away from me that in hindsight, you're always grateful for these lessons. But when you're on stage and you're like, don't know what to say, it doesn't feel so good. But what I took away is that I will never ever present again or talk about something where I don't feel that I have sufficient knowledge. That doesn't mean that I can't talk about things or only about things where I'm a complete expert. That's not what I mean. But you need to have a level of understanding that you feel comfortable with. Secondly, I will not let myself push into presenting something that I am not sure about, that I don't feel comfortable with and confident about. And I'm not saying this is the Coca-Cola company's fault. Absolutely not. These road shows were very important. They had been planned for weeks. There was huge pressure. It wasn't their fault that I had just been hired. They didn't necessarily even think about this. Think about it, because they were like, oh, well, that's no problem. We are here to support you on stage. And they did. However, I wasn't comfortable. And in hindsight, I should have pushed back. I should have thought about this and be like, you know what? For this team, as important as the roadshow is, it's not the right time. I need to understand this better. I need to put my marks on this so that I can actually stand up and confidently say, this is the solution that I believe in and that I will take forward. And here is why. And if it takes 2 weeks longer or 3 weeks longer, so be it. Let's find a way to do that. I wasn't able to do it at the time. And it was definitely a learning. Since then, honest to myself, I can say I don't think I've ever presented anything where I felt this is not right.
Yeah, it's such an incredible lesson, and I've done it, and not in such high stakes even scenarios, but you're given a presentation or it's last minute or someone's ill and you have to step in, or your boss says, oh, would you mind presenting this on behalf of the team, or whatever the scenario is, and you don't feel comfortable with it. It's new material, or you don't know it, or it's in a slightly different language, or even just a style that maybe you're not used to, and you feel utterly uncomfortable, and then you have to go and present. And I've done that many, many times, but your story had much higher stakes, right? Because you're talking about an organization going through change and talking about people and their jobs. And it's such a difficult thing to put in your boundaries while still do the presentation you've been asked to do. Yeah. You don't want to let the team down, but at the same time, you're trying to protect yourself. It's difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult balance because I also do believe firmly in stepping out of your comfort zone. Every time the conference where you saw me present was one of the examples, that was also stepping out of my comfort zone for me for different reasons, right? So I do believe that this is where growth comes from. However, you still need to feel comfortable with the discomfort. Yeah. So it's a fine line. And the other one is we've all been in situations where there is a company line that you might not fully agree with and that you have to still present and defend. And I'm okay with that, of course, within all ethical boundaries, etc. But again, you have to ask yourself in each of these situations if it's right for that and if it's actually the best thing for the business and the organization to do it like that, independent of my own insecurities. Yeah. And so I look at it a bit more differentiated now than I did at the time.
And how did you rebuild your confidence and presence back up from the moment where you're going, I'm now terrified about going to these other countries and doing the same presentation, and oh my gosh, I've just had a big confidence hit. How did you rebuild yourself back up? Because I didn't see that, but what I did see was the incredible presentation I mentioned at the beginning. How did you go on that journey, and how could others learn from how you've done that?
Well, there is one element is you can get help. I had great help from an external consultant. You may even know him, Richard Jacobs, who works with a theater improv company in businesses. That's one of the many things he does. And he's an amazing actor. And he helped me ahead of one of the following presentations 6 months later to overcome my nervousness by really working with me before the actual event through visualization and things like this. So that's just one element. I think the more important one even for me was that I built up my credibility for myself and the people around me step by step. So I had to rebuild this whole new team. Everybody had new jobs, and the services that this team now was able to offer to the businesses were different and much smaller and reduced than what all these people were used to before in the business. So I needed, first of all, to build quick wins to make them stick with me on the longer journey. So I defined for myself and with the help of the team what the quick wins were and make sure that I nailed those. That built my confidence, and it built the confidence of the people around me that there's something there.
Yeah.
So they started to see the value of my work and the work of and my position and the work of the team. So I built that up time after time. And then I kept pushing myself into the discomfort by saying yes to certain presentations where in me, I'd rather have said no, but I'm like, no, I'm going to do this. And I noticed that the moment that I was actually on stage and when I was actually comfortable with my material, I loved it. I just needed to get over this hump. And once I did that a few times, it was fine.
Yeah. Fascinating, because I'm sitting here thinking, I obviously wasn't in the organization when that part happened. I didn't see any of this. And you don't also know what leaders go through either, because that's part of their job, isn't it? To protect the team, support the team, and be the anchor or be the umbrella, be the protection, whichever way around you want to look at it. And it's interesting because these are the human stories behind leadership and the challenges and the difficulties and the confidence knock. And then it's how you pick yourself up and get yourself even to a better place. But it's fascinating for me personally, because I saw you on the stage doing this incredible presentation and I had no clue of what you've just described. It shows the journey that you went on and how much that changed, because there's a completely different experience to the one I experienced. What would you tell others in a similar situation to help them?
I think when I'm being asked for advice, there's always one thing I come back to, which I just feel is so important. And that's around owning your own narrative, controlling your own story, and don't let your own story be controlled by other people. It comes down to the fact that we're all being judged. We're all being put in a box. You know, you put me in a very nice box there. Other people, I'm sure people in the French audience put me in a very different box there. Right? And so we're all being judged all of the time. And our narrative that we have for ourselves in our head is very rarely the perception that people have of us. So I would ask people to be much more conscious about how you want to show up, for instance, as a leader, and what is the box you want to be in. What do you think the box is today, which is pretty much your current brand, and what is the box you actually want to be put in, because we are all put in a box whether we like it or not. Make sure it's the box you want to be in. And if you're clear on what box you want to be in, then reflect back on, okay, what does it mean for my own leadership behaviors? How do I need to communicate? How do I need to act to engage for people to observe me in a way that they have enough data points to put me in the box that I want to be in? Because every interaction, every meeting at the water cooler, it's all data points that, based on our biases, we use to validate the image we always had, or to maybe start questioning it and putting people maybe over time into another box. So a long explanation for quite a succinct piece of advice, which is own your narrative, own your story.
And that feels like that's carried through into your current venture, right? Because that's what you're helping leaders do today. So really help with their executive presence and their storytelling and their leadership capabilities. Can you tell us about your latest venture and your business?
Oh, yeah, pleasure. Yeah, so I founded TECA, stands for Teichmann Executive Coaching and Advisory, in 2018. As you figured out by now, I am originally German, but I've all over like Europe, the UK, the US, and now I call Dublin my home, and that's where TECA is located, is based. And from here, we serve clients from all over the world. When I say we're a small team of advisors and coaches. And similar to me, the only condition is really that we have the same passion about this approach to business and people as this magic mix of where miracles can happen. And we act as strategic sounding boards, as thought partners for senior leaders, but also aspirational leaders and founders, entrepreneurs, when it comes to their strategic, operational, and leadership challenges. We also do leadership development. You mentioned executive presence. That's one of our most popular workshops. Actually, the next cohort kicks off tomorrow. I'm very much looking forward to that. 10 people from all over different functions, different industries. It's always a very inspiring mix. And then thirdly, we also help with change initiatives, whether it's around culture change, digital transformation, or nowadays very much about the question of what does leadership and engagement actually mean in an AI-driven world. It's just fascinating and just brings a whole new set of challenges to leadership, I believe. So it's a very, let's say, eclectic mix, and the piece that holds it together is leadership.
And what was it that made you want to go from such a corporate run-up to it's all about leadership? I'm starting my own business. Talk to me about the leap, because you were also at Google as well. So, I mean, from Nike to Coca-Cola to Google, some of the dream businesses that people would love to work in, to setting up your own business. Was there a moment? Was there a ripple?
I'm not sure that there was this one specific moment, because it's a journey. And on this journey, in my case, I discovered what really matters to me in my professional life. And to me, it was, amongst other things, the impact I can have on the business through people. And as much as I loved, and I'm not just saying that every single one of these companies, they're all amazing in their own rights, I still felt that I'm in a way limited in terms of the impact I can have. Obviously, if you're in a senior position, there's thousands of people who might in the end reporting to you, if you make it to the top. And of course, that's a great impact. And Coca-Cola is like in 7 countries in the world. But at the personal level, I just felt that I would have more impact if I could choose who I work with, if I could work across various companies, various industries, and various functions, because the question of leadership are not dependent on your actual work environment in terms of your sector. And that was something that developed over time, where it was like, is this really what I want? Or is there more to give? Because it's also a passion point, right, for me. Yeah. And then I felt, in particular my time at Google, which was rather short, I was with Google only 1.5 years before I decided to leave. I felt that the people piece was actually, it was a validation almost. The people piece was the strongest impact I had at Google. The Google business certainly didn't need me from a business perspective. It's an amazing money-making machine. But I felt that I was able to make a difference to a number of people. And I was like, wow, if I can do that even in a great company like Google, what can I do when I'm free?
Yeah.
And freedom is the other thing, because one of my values always, since I was a little child, is independence, autonomy. And no matter how senior you are, you always have a boss in a way. And whether it's as a CEO, whether it's the chair. And so it's like, what would it be like if I could do what I think I'm really good at, where I believe I can have an impact on people and businesses, and I'm free to do it the way I want to do it. And that's when at some point I decided, you know what, stop talking and thinking about this. Like, just do it. Just literally just do it, just done. In all fairness, it's not an easy transition. After so many years in corporate, I always compare it to grief. Even if you make the decision yourself, for the first 1 or 2 years, depending on the person, I feel there's this grieving period where there's things you really miss about the corporate life. I always say it's like a dysfunctional family. You might not like all your family members, but it's still your family, right? And you miss your family. But after 1 or 2 years, that kind of passes and you're not tempted anymore by offers you might get, etc. And you really come into yourself. And that's what happened for me. And this is now like 6-7 years ago. And I wouldn't go back for anything. I love what I do.
That's fantastic.
The question that I just mentioned on AI and leadership is obviously becoming more and more important. I find it really exciting. For instance, I just finished a whole program on MIT on the question of AI and leadership, which was absolutely fascinating, very inspirational. And I can only recommend people to, get a better foundational knowledge. And I also partnered now with an amazing AI company that is based in Vienna. And every 2 weeks jointly, we are now publishing newsletters. Today, the third one came out. It's called Beyond the Noise, and it is dedicated to leadership topics related to AI. So we talk about things like how overwhelmed the normal leader is by everything that is like he or she is bombarded with at the moment, and where even to start. We talk about the importance in today's newsletter, the importance about communication when it comes to AI. We talk about the relevance of company culture when it comes to implementing successful AI projects. And that has certainly become a new passion point for myself and Tekka.
Yeah, fantastic. That sounds wonderful. I will make sure we add a link to the newsletter on the comments and on the podcast so people can check it out. That sounds brilliant. What's so interesting about the AI and leadership is, for me personally, and there's a lot more we could have a whole podcast just on this.
Yeah. And we should.
We should.
When you run out of other people to talk to, come back to me and we talk about it.
We won't be running out, but we'll certainly be coming back for the sequel. Now, what's so interesting for me is that in a world of AI, I think the role of leadership should be even more human. And if we can do nothing but that, I think we would be in a much better place. But let's save that for a whole other podcast. Stefanie, can I ask you one final question that we ask all of our incredible guests that we call wave makers, because you've been making waves in the industry. What advice would you give to aspiring wave makers?
In addition to what I said earlier, which is control your story, own your story, I've seen over and over again is what I call the visibility gap. So my advice in particular to people in their earlier career or they're in the middle of their career, do not assume that your work speaks for yourself, because it doesn't. Obviously you need to deliver. You obviously need to know what you're talking about, but don't think that your boss will necessarily talk or speak up for you. You have to do the speaking up yourself. You have to take credit where credit is due. And you need to make sure that people actually know what you're doing. Don't misunderstand this as bragging. And this is particularly going out to your female listeners, because there is even a higher threshold of what is often perceived as self-marketing. You know, there's nothing wrong with self-marketing as long as you remain authentic and as long as you deliver on your promises. So do good work and speak about it.
I love that. Such fantastic advice. Stefanie Teichmann, thank you so much for your honesty, your strength and your stories, from everything from finding your voice through a lisp in childhood to incredibly confident presentations, from feedback from leaders and learning about timing, to owning the mic and setting your own boundaries of when you don't want to hold the mic or it needs to pass to someone else, to first impressions and executive presence. It's been an amazing conversation of finding your own voice, walking your own path, and showing that ripples can come from the most personal of moments and still be the biggest waves in your life and in your career. So thank you so much for your time. It's been incredible.
Thank you, Laura. It was a pleasure to be a guest here. Thank you very much for your time.
If you're looking at elevating your storytelling for your brand and business, get in touch with the Ripple Impact to see how we can help your business. I will drop Stefanie's Tekka link and newsletter into this chat as well. That's a wrap on this Ripple episode. Tune in weekly for more bold voices and inspiring wave maker guests. I'm Laura Barber. This is the Ripple Impact. Thank you so much, Stefanie. For everyone else, we will see you next week. Bye for now.